This episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Wasabi and Apollon Security. Today, we're speaking to Simon Fell, the Barrow and Furness MP. We discuss how we capitalise on the current boom in local investment, controversial decisions, and how we engage people that have become fed up with politics. We hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did.
Welcome, Simon. Thanks very much for joining us this morning at Wasabi, our main sponsor. We really appreciate you being here today. Before we dig into the politics side of things, we'd just like to go back to the start, get to know a bit more about you, where you were brought up. If you could tell us a bit more about your childhood.
I can do just that. So I was born just outside of Preston. Well, in fact, that's a complete lie. I was born in Preston, raised just outside of it, and had a pretty normal childhood. My dad worked overseas for most of my life, so sort of summer holidays and stuff, I used to go over and see him with my mum. And he worked all over the world, so I got to see lots of really interesting places. He worked in China for a few years, worked in Texas and the States and Saudi Arabia, so got to see some really interesting parts of the world. But sort of Preston, Lancashire was my home. I'd never really thought about getting into politics or anything like that. I didn't really have an interest in it. But I got to the stage where I'd been through school, I was about to go off to university. I got a place at Warwick to read English Lit. And I needed a summer job. So I thought, what I'll do, I'm really good at writing. I'm quite a hard worker. I hope people think that. And I thought, I'll just write to a whole bunch of businesses in Preston, in Manchester, around that sort of area who do marketing, do comms, that sort of thing, and just basically say, will you give me a job for 6 months, pay me a bit of money, I will work hard and be worth you taking a chance on me. And a few of them came back, and my dad just sort of randomly said, why don't you try writing to our local MP as well? So I did that, and much to my surprise, he got back in touch and said, yeah, come and see me at my constituency surgery. So I popped down and saw him and got on really well with him. And he said, well, tell you what, why don't you come and work in London for me during the week, and then because your parents live in my constituency, I will drive you back at the weekends. So you can do the surgery with me at the weekends, and basically it saves you the train travel and all that sort of stuff.
Perfect.
And of course, no one had offered me to work in London, so I was like, right, I'm going to jump at that and go for it. And it's amazing, and I'm back doing a version of that job now. But you work in a palace. It's this incredible environment. You get to see these people that you only see on TV wandering around, and that was all cool. But it didn't hook me. But what hooked me was the constituency surgeries. And we had this one particular case that always springs to mind. Loads of people have heard me talk about this, so my apologies to your listeners if they've heard it before. But I had this guy who came in, and he was concerned about his brother. So his brother had been in an industrial accident, and he was a factory worker, and he'd damaged his back. I can't remember whether he broke it or just damaged it in some way. But he was then bedridden or needed to be in a wheelchair, and they could not get an electric wheelchair for him. So his brother, the guy who came to see us, had to quit his job to care for him. His sister had to quit her job to care for him. And his mental health is just absolutely in the pits. And this is before people really talked about mental health as a thing. But they said, look, we're really worried about him. He's not leaving the house, and if we got in this electric wheelchair, then he could get out and he'd have a life, and it might not be what he had before, but he'd have something. And they were driving themselves potty because the council were about to spend an absolute fortune on making accommodations to the house so he could get up and down the stairs and all that sort of stuff. They're like, why are they spending money on this, but they won't give him the thing that will give him a life back? So I did my job, and I wrote a few letters off to various people as the MP I was working for, and didn't think anything else about it. And then a few weeks later, I was in Longridge going for a pint, and I got a tap on the shoulder, and it was the guy who come to see us at surgery, and he had tears streaming down his face, and he gave me a big hug, and I'd never hugged this guy before in my life. And he said, look, thank you. I genuinely think you saved my brother's life. And I was like, what's happened? He said, well, we got the wheelchair. It means I've been able to go back to work. He's now out and about, and he's happy. My sister's part-time carer now rather than full-time. You have changed his life. And I
Awesome.
never thought about it. It's just the most incredible thing. And you realise the power of politics, like just local, down and dirty, sending letters off, complaining, using the power of the office. And that's what got me hooked.
How old were you then?
So what was I, Gabby, how old are you then? 20, 19, 20 sort of thing. And I loved it. And then I went and got proper jobs for the next 20 years and then eventually ended up here. So.
Just on the power of politics, you said you used your words and wrote a letter to the right people. We found the power of a letter is unbelievable. We write letters to everyone now, don't we?
Yeah.
Weekly, we're sending notes out. Wrote a letter to yourself, didn't we, to get you on the podcast? But
Did, and here I am.
Yeah.
Regretting that one already.
We haven't got going.
But I just think you managed to start off in politics by writing to the MP.
Yeah.
I
It,
think
it is just one of those things, and persistence really matters, and sometimes it gets you a long way. But like the difficult thing about the job I've got is you often see people at their absolute worst because they've tried that. Most people will self-serve. If they've got a problem, they will go to the customer complaints line, they'll speak to the ombudsman, they'll do whatever they need to do. And they get to me when none of that's worked. And it might be a little thing that they just feel is really unjust, or it might be something really horrific. But they get to me at the point where they have just tried everything and they're so frustrated and so angry. So you do kind of see the worst of people. But just because I've got a little portcullis on the top of my letterhead, often you can just start conversations again, and sometimes you can really just shift things along and get them moving.
Yeah.
so. Post uni, can you tell us your career path, your proper jobs?
Proper jobs. So what did I do? Straight after uni, I went to work for 3. So Hutchinson Whampoa, who own 3, the mobile phone company, and I worked for them. And this was in the days when, so we had the internet. Facebook, I think Facebook was running at the time. But it was the first time that people were getting internet on their phones. And my job for them was 2 things. So one was the rollout of mobile broadband. So this is trying to get the maths up so people could actually use their phones, like 3G phones, in the outside world. And the other was child internet safety, which was such an interesting area at the time. So I think, we had Facebook. Bebo was the big children's social network.
Remember that well, yeah.
There we go. And we had that first point where children were going online for the first time. And, normally, if you were bullied at school, it would stop at the school gates, that'll be it. But now it's following them to their bedrooms. So we had to sort of work with these big social media companies, the Department for Education, all of that, trying to figure out how we start to deal with this entirely new challenge. What do heads need? How do parents get the information they need to understand what kids are doing on their phones and their devices? All that sort of thing. It was really, really interesting. And something which we are still dealing with the consequences now. We just passed a bill in Parliament on exactly this.
Right.
So I did that, and off the back of that, I set up my own communications business. So I had at its peak, about 20 clients, just doing comms for them, marketing, that sort of thing. And I did that for about 3 years, and I really enjoyed it, but it was just me. And I did that thing that lots of people who run small businesses do, where I was terrified about that next step of taking someone on.
Yeah. We were like that with Howden.
I was terrified about that next step of taking someone on, and I wasn't quite sure I knew what. I was just hanging on by my fingernails, trying to manage all these clients and do my tax return and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, actually, the bigger problem is I'm not learning anything. I'm I learn with every job, but I don't have a mentor. I don't have anyone above me who's saying, how about this? Let's try you in this area. So I decided I needed to go and get a different proper job. So after that, I spent a decade working in fraud and financial crime, which was something I'd sort of dabbled at, I should say, counter fraud. I wasn't a fraudster, to be
Exclusive. That's going to go viral.
So I fund everything.
We'll take that out.
Which was just such an interesting area. And my job was so I started off right at the bottom of the business, and I ended up as the number 2 in the business. And my job was basically, by the time I left, to try and get almost every bank in the UK and every insurer and bits of government and charities and all that to work together. So they've got a common message about how do you protect yourself from fraud? How do you make sure that you've got the defences you need to do the job? And also for industry and government, what should they be saying to people and what protection should they be putting in place? So lots of the stuff now which we sort of take for granted, like your phone buzzing to check that you actually made that transaction, you've got to put the code in, that two-factor authentication, that all came from that period of work.
Right.
We are, I'll tell you now, nowhere near where we need to be. Like, fraud is the number one crime in the UK. It's terrible. And it's really difficult to solve. But it was such an interesting sort of decade doing that sort of stuff. And then Barrow came up for election. And I just thought, you know what? This is where my family's from. It's one of those places, if any of your listeners haven't figured out, I'm Conservative. It's one of those places where I thought the Labour Party took for granted because it always had a Labour MP pretty much. And I don't really believe in that. I thought, you know what, if you go in and you put in the hard yards, you might actually be able to win a few people over. I didn't quite get there first time. I didn't quite get there second time. But third time round, after just wearing everybody down, they let me have a shot. And here I am now. So
to narrow in on that a little bit then, so I think you were the first Tory MP since 1987, is that right?
Sounds about right.
About right. What do you think led to you becoming successful on that third attempt? What was it that was different from the first and second attempt that got you over the line?
Well, firstly, thank you for using the word successful. I'm not sure all of my constituents would say that. So what was it? So again, to that point of showing up, there are places where, and you will read about this all over the place, whether it is in the southeast of England, which is like solid Tory, or in areas that are traditionally Labour. They say, get a donkey, stick a red rosette on it or a blue rosette, it will win here. And I just don't believe that. And we saw it in Scotland that was solidly Labour, and suddenly the SNP turned up and started fighting, and Labour was completely wiped out. And we saw it in the last election with what we call the red wall, where all these traditional Labour seats went blue. And actually, I think if you turn up, you show that you care, you show that you know about the issues that matter locally, and you put in a good fight, people will listen. Because actually 9 times out of 10, communities where you say stick a donkey in and they'll be elected, they're not given a choice. So it's about giving them that choice. And when I stood in 2015, this was not a target seat for the Conservatives at all. We were essentially told, make a showing, but that'll be it. You're never going to win here. I said, I just don't think that's true. So me and my very, very small team, we had no support, no money, did a little bit of fundraising, and I put 4 leaflets through everybody's door, and anybody I could see, I spoke to. If they're in their garden, when I had a leaflet in my hand, hi, how you doing? I'm Simon, I'm your candidate. And we went from a 6,000 odd Labour majority, and knocked it down to 700 and something. And that's just doing the hard yards. That's turning up to debates. It is trying to get in the paper as much as possible. It is talking to as many people, and it's showing people as an option. And actually, there is someone else who could do something. And then 2017 was a little bit close, so got it down to 200 and something. And then this time round, basically reversed it. And it's 5,700 and something in my favour now. Right. But you've got to keep that up. You've got to show people you still care, you're still working. Because quite rightly, people are fickle. If they don't see someone standing on their side and fighting for them, they'll just go somewhere else.
Okay. And so when are you next up for election in our local area?
Good question. It is up to the Prime Minister, but my guess is probably tail end of 2024.
Yeah. And has your strategy changed this time round from the first time you were elected, or what's going to be the main sort of things you're going to be focusing on?
I think there's a few things. So obviously, if you're not the sitting MP, it's all about what you can offer people and what you're saying you're going to do for them. When you are the sitting MP, you kind of fight on your record a bit. So I'll be talking a lot about that. And if you've been lucky enough to have one of my leaflets through your doors, you'll see the themes there. But it's all about investment we've managed to get into the area, how hopefully we've managed to change things for the better in spite of the pandemic and all that. But so it'll be partly that. and then partly sort of the vision for the future. So that's what I'll be campaigning on. But the vast majority of people, and you know, read any opinion poll, you read anyone who knows anything about politics, they'll stand this up. Most people just don't care about politics. Like they don't know who their MP is. They completely tune out of anything on the news that's got anything to do with politics. And you can see it when you know, you do those opinion polls, say, you know, who is the Home Secretary, and 30% of people know, and you know, who is the Foreign Secretary, 10% of people know. They just don't care about this stuff because, frankly, people are getting on with their lives. They just want politics out the way. They just want the world to work, and they only get angry when it's something that is deeply affecting them, and then they start to get involved and pointing fingers and quite rightly saying what you're going to do to change things. So come general election time, most people just look at what the leaders of the political parties are doing and saying and offering, asking, you know, do I feel better than I did 4 years ago, better off? Do I feel like my family's in a more stable position? So I, you know, as a sitting MP, I have a bit of influence around that. But actually, most people just look at, you know, the big election circus that's going on the TV, and that's how they make their minds up. So I'm kind of in their hands, but I'll be fighting hard on my own record too.
Do you think your past experiences in proper jobs has given you a greater perspective of what the people of Barrow want and what the general public want?
So I don't think necessarily in a better perspective of what the people of Barrow want. I think you get that in the job itself. So you've got to spend a lot of your time. So, you know, straight after this podcast, I'm off to do a constituency surgery just on Market Street. I did one yesterday. Like, things like that are so important because it means you're talking to real people. Like, what are your concerns? What are you bothered about? What's causing you grief at the moment? And you have those chats. I spent a whole week 9 to 5 just knocking on people's doors, not with any agenda other than saying, hi, I'm Simon, I'm your MP. What's bothering you at the moment? And most people there and then say, absolutely nothing, I'm pretty happy actually. But yeah, so 1 in 3 doors, 1 in 5 doors, they do tell you something. You know, we put surveys out to do exactly the same. And the reason is you need to understand what's bothering people because that's the only way you can help them, you can answer their concerns. So that's my way of staying in touch with people and trying to understand how best to serve the people of Barrow. But I think having a career outside of politics really matters because you understand how the world works so much better. So when I worked at 3, that was a big corporate machine, a multinational machine. And so much of what I do now when I'm talking to, you know, secretaries of state or the chancellor or, you know, trying to get things through government, I can draw on lessons from when I was working there. So I remember trying to run a marketing campaign at 3, and I didn't sit in the marketing team, but you know, we were trying to make life a little bit easier for people who were travelling overseas and wanted to use their phones. And we had to get it through about 8 different teams. So legal had to look at it, compliance, regulatory, marketing, the PR lot. We had to talk about how we were going to get it into retail stores so customers could see it. Had to talk to the web team. So you're running around all these departments trying to get things signed off, and they've all got their bits to say. And actually, you know what, that's how government works. So when I was trying to get the money for the bypass at Grisbeck, which you would think would be simple, right? The Secretary of State had said, we're going to do it, the money's there. So you just assume it's done. It turns out you need to get this money in by a certain deadline, otherwise it falls away and it disappears and the Treasury just steals it back. So I spent literally a week of my life running round from the Cabinet Office to Number 10 to Department of Transport to the Chancellor's office, back and forth as they all had to sign off different bits of this paper and plan to get it into the county council so they could sign it off, to get it back to Number 10 so it could get final approval and then go. That was a week of my life doing that. And if I hadn't had the experience of working in a big corporate where you've got to run around and do the same thing and understand what that sign-off process looks like and what motivates people to say, oh, actually, you know what, I do care about this above the 20 other things I've got on my to-do list today. You just don't get it done. So you sort of take those experiences from the outside world and bring them in. And, you know, I won't labour the point, but, you know, same with, you know, when I ran a small business. Like when small business owners come to me now asking for help or support or, with ideas, I'm so much more receptive to them because I've been in that space, myself. And I know just how much it feels like you're spinning 100 plates and trying to desperately keep them all up in the air. I think if you haven't done that sort of thing before, it's almost like an academic exercise. You just don't get the feel for it,
Definitely. Just to change tack a little bit then. So we were speaking before this podcast, doing a bit of research, obviously, and there's a number of projects going on in the Barrow and Furness area. So to list a few, we've got obviously the Strongholder Book at BE, we've got the Ronhead developments for the holiday lettings or homes. I think there's a carbon facility being built and a hydrogen facility being built. There's all sorts of stuff going on. And even the Eden project up in Morecambe, which will have some impact in the Barrow and Furness area. What we were wondering is what's your involvement in them for a kick-off? And then how do we capitalise on the back of them projects to make Barrow a better place to live and sort of work in the long term?
Good question. If you're ever looking for a comms job in my team. So I am involved in all of them to greater or lesser extents. And it's a difficult question to answer. So my job is kind of to convene people. So an MP, we don't have any money. So the council get pots of money to deliver things. They have control over planning. If you're a local business, they're the ones who are doing the investing. My job is often to unplug gaps and make sure the right people are talking to the right people, and we can get things over the line. So to take one of those things, for instance, you talked about the hydrogen project. So this is a really exciting one where Kimberly-Clark are looking at using, basically taking themselves entirely off the electricity grid. They are a high energy using business. They're talking about taking themselves entirely off the electricity grid and being powered by hydrogen. Now, to get that done, we need money from government to get that project off the ground. It needs approval from government. So quite a lot of that running around for the Grisbeck bypass I just talked about, I am doing for that. I'm making sure that the council is prioritising that project right. I'm talking to the business on quite a regular basis who are behind it to make sure that they are comfortable with how everything's going, and keeping up the pressure in Parliament with ministers to make sure that they're all listening. So all that sort of goes on behind the scenes. And most of the projects you listed are a similar sort of thing where, I keep talking about spinning plates, but I just keep those plates spinning as best I can to keep them going. But sort of bigger picture stuff, like I really think it's quite hard. And I'm trying to figure out a way to communicate it to people better. It's really quite hard to explain the scale of what's happening in our area. So, we focus on the shipyard when we talk about Barrow, but there's an order book there now which is 30 years long, thanks to commitments by the government on getting Astute out the door, Dreadnought, and then SSNR. The AUKUS Pact, when's this going out, by the way?
Next Monday, hopefully.
Next Monday, all right.
We can hold that.
There will be an announcement on Monday. If you've read the news, you'll know about it. But the AUKUS Pact, which is Australia, the US, and the UK doing submarines together, that is going to be fundamental for Barrow, and it's going to take what is 30 years of work and extend it by quite some time. And the investment and the jobs that will be created from that is absolutely huge. And then we talk about the energy stuff. So we've got the hydrogen, Spirit Energy, who used to basically pull gas out of the ground under the sea, are now moving to carbon capture and storage. And they will be one of the biggest carbon capture and storage facilities in the world. And, for listeners who don't know what that means, it is taking the carbon that is heating up our planet, capturing it and shoving it securely into these vast spaces under the sea where, they used to have gas, and now we're putting this stuff, so we're sequestering it under there. It's going to be an enormous business. And then we've got Sellafield up the road. We've got the second largest offshore wind farm off our coast, and we've just done the auction round for the next bit of that. That is going to become the largest offshore wind farm in the world. we're talking about floating solar panels on Cavendish Dock, more use of renewables all over the shop. So we've got this huge investment in the shipyard, but actually what we don't talk about in a really coherent way is the energy stuff we're doing. Now, we could genuinely be the UK's leaders in renewable energy. What we're really bad at is tying that together. So if you look at the Tees Valley, they've got this big strategy around how renewable energy will be treated and how you're going to have the environment where people can move from hydrogen production to wind farms to solar really easily. We don't have that sort of network here, and that's one of the things we've got to work really hard on. So you've got shipyard investment, you've got that, and then you've got the developments like you mentioned, Ronhead. I mean, that's got to go through planning, and I know it's deeply contentious. So the council will set a whole load of criteria for that, and say, you've got to meet your environmental standards, biodiversity, you've got to make sure access to it is fine. And if they tick all those boxes, then it might be able to go ahead. And my job at this stage is representing my constituents. So people are coming to me quite rightly aggrieved and concerned about it, saying, right, what about the Toads? What about this? What about that? What about Lots Road? And I make sure that the council is listening to them. Because what you can't have is a situation where the council approves it or denies approval for it, but they haven't looked at the evidence. So I've just basically got to keep everyone straight on that.
Okay.
So many and varied. But I do think the big picture stuff, we've got so much investment coming in, 120 million of new capital funding through levelling up funds and town deals and all that sort of stuff. We've got the submarine stuff. We've got the renewable energy projects coming on. This will feel like a very different place in a very short period of time, which is great, but we need to capitalise on that.
Yeah. How do you sell that? So we've got all that investment coming into the town, especially Barrow and the surrounding areas. How do you then sell that to other commercial businesses to say, actually, come and set up shop in Barrow in our town centres to rejuvenate it, and like things like business trade? How do you make that attractive to them? We can see all this investment come in, but if they don't come and follow it, then nothing changes in the town centre.
So it's a bit chicken and egg, and it's a really, you've asked probably one of the most difficult questions I face into. You kind of got to build it for them to come. So if we think about the centre of Barrow, and it's probably one of the top issues I get people contacting me about. They say, what on earth is happening to our high street? We talk about all this money coming in, we talk about all this investment, but the high street is falling to bits, graffiti all over the place, there's litter blowing down the road. And it is awful, right? There's no getting away from it. But it is going to fundamentally change. So, there's a 60 million quid going into the covered market and the Forum in Barrow, which will turn into this big new art space with a food hall. There's going to be a pocket park at the back of it to connect the market to Dalton Road. Like all of that will feel different. Portland Walk, BAE are buying or have bought 5-6 of the buildings in there from Debenhams and WH Smith and Body Shop and all that. So there's going to be people in town, working in town, which means footfall, because the killer for shops is just not having people in. And this is the problem when M&S shuts down, when Debenhams shuts down, you lose people in town. So the shops next to them don't have as many people popping in and don't have as many people shopping. So you need to get that footfall in. And it's what Ulverston, where we're sat now, it's what Ulverston gets right. Lots of different things to attract people in. You can stop and have a sandwich. You can go out and potter around the shops, all that sort of stuff. So there's always people in here. There's always people shopping. But Barrow's going the wrong way. So all of that is going to change quite soon. So my job here is to try and sell that to developers and businesses and say, well, actually, you know what? We've got now 30 plus years of work in the shipyard, guaranteed money in the area, massive wage bill. We've got this investment into town. So actually, you've got this little nexus now with the market and the bottom end of Portland Walk, where you're going to have people. So why not start to invest? Why not start to look at changing some of the buildings there and doing something exciting with it? Like the university campus that's coming in next to the Submarine Academy in Barrow, that is it's going to be game changing for the place. But one of the reasons it's going to be game changing isn't just because we lose young people because there's no tertiary education in town. It's because we're going to have young people in town.
How many students are you expecting?
So by the time it goes up to 3 years worth of students in the university, you're going to have a student population roughly the size of Askham. So it's going to be huge. And some of them will be homegrown, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be displacement of people who are in Barrow already, or Ulverston, or Askham, Bolton, wherever it is. But some will be from outside the area. And they're going to be in town. So there's already exciting developments happening, and local business owners talking about, could I turn one of the shops on the high street that's not used at the moment partly into a sort of event space, so young people have got something to do in town, and then turn the top floors into student accommodation. And again, once you've got footfall, once you've got students in town, the place really begins to change and motor. And all this is coming, but we've just got to pitch it right and judge it right. And one of the challenges we have, so I'm the MP, but I don't have any money. The council,
don't believe that.
but I don't have budgets for marketing or running an investment portfolio or anything like that. That's what mayors do. We don't have a mayor. The council should be doing that, but the council isn't just running Barrow. It's running, especially when the new one kicks in a few weeks' time, it's running Kendal and Penrith and all of that. So its attention is spread quite wide. So we need to get businesses in and focused on this as well, and basically put together a package saying, this is Barrow, this is Ulverston, this is Dalton. Huge opportunities here. Now is the time to come in and invest and capitalise.
I was just going to mention that engineers studying at university, when you look at all the projects going on in this area, you're looking at where you're going after university. This course soon is going to be where those young engineers are going to want to go and work because of the vast choices they've got in which industry they can go into all on one course. So it makes this a desirable place to come. But when you're studying at university, there's no mention of Barrow when you're looking for jobs. Who leads that? Like BAE systems are ever present. And I went to Lancaster to do my masters. There's always pop-up stalls saying, come and work for us, come down south and work for us, come over to the East Coast, go offshore. All the big wind energy firms are always ever present at Lancaster and surrounding universities, but Barrow never gets a mention. But soon it's going to be where young people like that are going to want to work.
Well, look, I hope so. I really hope so. Who leads on it is the key question, and we don't have a real answer to that. So those with deep pockets, and you mentioned BAE, and quite rightly so, they can afford to go around to student jobs fairs and all that sort of stuff. If you're a thriving SME in Furness, you don't generally have the money to do that. So you'll go to local jobs fairs. You might go to Lancaster Uni, but you won't be going to the University of Manchester. You won't be going to Liverpool. So actually, yesterday or the day before yesterday, we had our second Furness SMEs meeting, which I attend, which is local businesses like Oxley's and Siemens and others who are, they're not small, but they are SMEs. They do absolutely amazing work in the community. They've got apprenticeship programs. Genuinely, some of the stuff that goes on in sheds up and down Furness is absolutely amazing, but you never hear about it. And this is one of the things we're looking at, where how do we get this grouping of really innovative, interesting businesses into the position where they can market in the same way and work alongside BAE, so we can say, you know what, if you come here to work, if it doesn't work out for you at BAE, say, then you've got GSK, you've got Siemens, you've got Playdale, you've got all these fantastic businesses who are interested in your skills, and also there will be something for your partner to do here as well because of the vast array of things. And by the way, we are at maximum 15 minutes drive from a national park, and you've got this amazing coastline and trying to get that marketing strategy right, so we can say to people, we are a peninsula in the middle of nowhere, but with that comes some amazing things. Being on a peninsula means coastline, it means beauty everywhere you look, and huge opportunities for you and your family as well. So we're trying to get that together and figure out how best to sell that.
I've got a question for you, some advice
Yeah.
from yourself, really. So we talked about Debenhams and Marks and Spencer's shutting, footfall through the town centre
Yeah.
being a big issue for local shop shutting. We identified that last year, and we tried to ask for some council-owned car park space in the town centre. When we go out in Ulverston, don't we? Like,
Oh, is this the project with the top floor of Debenhams car park?
no, it's different.
okay,
different. But, it was a car park on Abbey Road. We asked for it. We wanted to do a bit of a pop-up container bar. People coming off the train and stopping in Barrow rather than getting on the train and going to Ulverston. And we just hit block after block. We're at multiple locations we asked for, and we couldn't get past that first email saying no. Like, we didn't know who to. We wrote a letter to everyone we could think of in the council. We met the council on site. We just couldn't get that yes or send us a plan or give us a proposal. Where do we go with that sort of idea to try and bring people back into the
Hi,
town
I'm
centre?
Simon, I'm your MP. Come to me. That is really what I do. I just unblock things. And it doesn't mean I can get you what you want,
No, yeah.
but I can certainly get you in the door to have the conversations with the right people. 9 times out of 10, what you face is just the computer saying no. And if you can get past that initial decision and have a conversation with someone, you can generally find something that works. So, let's have a chat outside
Thank
of this
you, I
and
appreciate
see what
it.
I can do.
So to touch on some of your more controversial decisions then, whilst you've
There have been no controversial decisions.
Oh, there have on our Instagram. Yeah, so one of them I want to ask you about, just to give you the chance to explain it really, is the vote on free school meals, because that's something that popped up when we asked for questions and it got a lot of traction. People wanted a few more answers and your explanation around it. So just wondering if you can give us a bit of an insight on how that came about and why you voted the way you did.
Right. How long have you got?
As long as you need.
So I think this is one of the. I will answer the question directly, but I would just want to give a bit of context. So I think this is one of the big problems with politics at the moment, and it's one of the things you realise when you get into it. There is no such thing as a black and white issue. So actually, that's perhaps not quite true. So you think about the war in Ukraine, like Russia bad, Ukraine good. But very rarely do you have that sort of yes/no thing. And this is one of those issues. So. But the way we work now and the way people who get involved in politics see messaging is very much presented as, good, evil, yes, no. So the reality here is that as we headed into the pandemic, we had some really difficult choices to make around how we kept provision up for people who needed free school meals, but also how we looked beyond that for people who wouldn't qualify by the criteria that they normally have for preschool meals. So bear in mind, people going on to furlough. So you had some families who previously, so 1 wage, 2 wages coming into the home, suddenly cut by 20%. So they would be really struggling. And they'd be struggling for other reasons as well, because whereas their children would normally go into school and they wouldn't have to heat the home and feed them and et cetera during the day, now their children were at home. So they had less money and a greater burden on them. And then you have people who lost their jobs altogether, but because of how the system works and it doesn't automatically click you onto the free school meals category, you wouldn't necessarily qualify either. So there's a challenge with making sure that what we do as politicians fits the challenge that we're facing at the moment. And I went out and spoke to a whole bunch of local school heads and local teachers and said, look, what do you think we should be doing? And they said, well, look, we will absolutely take free school meals, we'll take the vouchers for free school meals and all that. But actually for us, and especially if you're talking about schools operating in some of the most deprived wards in the constituency, what they really didn't want to be doing was just handing out vouchers, which are effectively cash, to families which are in difficult situations, because they couldn't guarantee that that cash, those vouchers, would actually get spent on the children. And actually it's a sad reality, one of the things that really matters in schools is safeguarding. So the teachers can keep an eye on the kids, and if they turn up and they're not clean, they look like their clothes haven't been washed, if they look like they haven't been eating properly, then they can do that first safeguarding step to make sure those children are being looked after. And the big risk with the pandemic was that wouldn't be happening. So a lot of school teachers are saying, actually, we want some mechanism where we've got eyes on parents, or not parents, on children, because we want to make sure that they're okay and they're safe. So that's sort of the context. So dishing out free school meal vouchers was one way of answering the problem, but it would miss a whole bunch of people who were suddenly struggling, and it would mean that actually for some children who were not in the safest family environments, you might potentially be putting them at risk as a result. So when this debate came up, I'm on the record on this. I think I'm on BBC Cumbria talking about it, but arguing against Tim Farron, I said, I think what we need to be doing is something a little bit more innovative than this. And it's trickier, but it's about giving councils, or some authority like that, ended up being councils in the end, the ability to hold a pot of money to give it to people in need. So sure, schools can administer free school meals as they normally do to people they want to, but there's some flexibility around that, so there's still safeguarding. And that for people who, are struggling because they're on furlough, or struggling because they've lost their jobs, they can go out to the council, who will know them better and will have those safeguarding lists as well, because they work with DWP and others, and say, here's a pot of money, we can keep you going until you manage to get yourself on your feet again. And that's where we ended up. And the reality is, the scheme which we came up with, which is still running now, actually, we've just extended it for the next 6 months, cost far much more money and was far more generous than the initial vouchers which were talked about. But the reality of politics today is voted against free school meals. And that was the message that was presented. So we actually delivered a policy that was more generous, reached more people, and I think had far better outcomes. But when you're just throwing stuff around on Twitter, it makes it look like I and lots of my colleagues are completely heartless. But actually, we didn't just want the easy win. We wanted to do the right thing. And I'm very comfortable with that vote. I think it was the right thing to do, and I'm glad about where we've landed. But it is really difficult to explain what I've just said to you in 7 minutes in a 140-character tweet.
And just to quickly follow up on that then, so we talked a bit about criticism there. So you made a decision and you've been criticised for it by some people within the constituency. How do you deal with criticism? How bad does it get, and what effect does it have on you?
So I'm an MP, so my job is to act on behalf of my constituents as best as I can and explain why I've done that. And we vote, often 8, 11, 12 times a day on things. And I don't explain every vote because most people have no idea what the issues are, what the bills that we're looking at. They matter really to some people and not a lot to others. But things like that, I put an explainer out. So I did something on social media saying this is why I voted the way I did. I did something in the Mail for my weekly column saying the same thing. But it's pretty rough out there, and it's, I chair a group in Parliament about political literacy, about trying to get children involved in politics, young people involved in politics, because I think it really matters. And we're in this really dangerous position now where everything is characterised as black and white, and it is not. Politics is all shades of grey. But if you're on the wrong side of the debate, what the public sees as the wrong side of the debate, or what people who are very good at trolling on social media think is the right side of the debate, then you just get dragged through the mud. Mm-hmm. So the way I use social media is just hit and run. I put stuff up that I never look at comments, I never reply, and my team monitor them. I worry about their mental health sometimes, but it's just pretty nasty out there. But I think it's bad. The number of female colleagues and colleagues of colour in the comments who have just gone off Twitter, who have had so many threats against their lives, who are, female colleagues who daily get threats of rape purely because they're a woman in politics. It is absolutely awful. So I'm on the Home Affairs Committee, and we went away recently we're doing an inquiry into drugs. And it's, God, talk about a mixed bunch of MPs. So it's me, Diane Abbott, Lee Anderson, and then a whole bunch of really nice moderate people in the middle, somewhere between those two extremes. And we just sat on this coach going to this cannabis farm. And I can't remember who brought it up, but we were starting to talk about what someone had just had a death threat on their phone. They just got it. And, I've had so many now, I barely count them, but had this death threat on this. And he mentioned it. And Diane Abbott said, yeah, I had 230 death threats last year. And then we just started having a conversation about it. But the fact we were just having a conversation, that this is normal behaviour, that people feel that they can just threaten our lives, they can threaten our partners, they come after us. I've had a colleague who told me, she's a Welsh MP, she had to hide behind the sofa. So she's got a house of big windows at the front. She had to hide behind the sofa as this person who she'd previously reported to police 3 times was hammering on her window. And she was on the phone to the police and they're like, can you get to the alarm? She's like, no, because if I get to the alarm, he will see that I'm here. These guys, this is, I haven't had it that bad. But this is the world of politics now. And, if we want to get people involved in public life and get them changing the environment they live in and, fighting for their community and all that, we need to change this because this just isn't working.
Mm.
That's tough.
So there you go.
Yeah, tough, yeah.
We take it really poorly when we get bad criticism, email comments, and we read them. And but yeah,
we usually say nasty things behind closed doors about the people.
I mean, the thing I would say is, right, you've got to keep perspective. So who really replies to something on social media? Like if you see a post of someone's on social, and it's not a mate where you're having a bit of banter with them, you just see something someone else has put up. Who then goes out and says something offensive on that? I mean, they're a special category of people. And the reality is, who actually then looks at those comments? It's the people with a vested interest. So you've just got to kind of keep your head up here and think, these aren't real people. Like when as I said, a fortnight ago, I spent a week just knocking on people's doors. I got 0 abuse. The stuff that I get shouted at on social media about didn't come up once on the doorstep, because this isn't what people talk about or think about. They think about, I've just walked out my front door, there's a piece of litter blowing down the road, that paving stone's wobbly, that street light's not working, no one's collecting my bins. That's what bothers them. It's not some abstract vote in Parliament that they've never even heard of.
Has there ever been a time where you've disagreed with your party's views but still had to support it?
So yeah, and we have in effect a 2-party system in the UK. We've got Labour and we've got the Tories, and there's other so in Scotland and the SNP really matters. If you're in Wales, then Plaid does. But the Lib Dems and the Greens and others are they're not challenging for power. It's always going to be between those 2 parties. But what that means is that those 2 parties are really broad coalitions. And if you look at the Labour Party, it's a really good example of that, where you had Jeremy Corbyn in power for a bit. He was from the real far left of that party. And then you've got, Tony Blair and others sat on the complete opposite wing. And you'd never think they were both Labour, but they are. And it's the same with the Tories. We have people who sit, on the left of the party, and I consider myself one of them. I'm pretty liberal. And you've got people who sit on the right, and I find it really difficult to agree with them. But politics is about trying to find your way through that. So a lot of the time where I have difficulties with what my party is putting forward, it's about trying to get them to change what they're doing. So we spend an inordinate amount of time, and it won't just me, it'll be every political party and every politician who cares, trying to get them to shift their views. So for instance, universal credit, I'm a big proponent of it. I think it's an amazing system. But we had a point during the pandemic where we uplifted universal credit to help people through that really difficult period where they couldn't go to work and all that. But it was time limited and it was going to fall away. And goodness me, I fought battles in the party on that. And it's about what you got to do is get coalitions together. So we got loads of former secretaries of state for work and pensions, got loads of backbenchers in. We argued the case in Parliament whenever there was a debate, and we got the government to change its mind. But we did it without voting against the government once. And it's kind of that push-pull. So a lot of stuff, it's kind of like a duck. If you think of a duck floating on a pond, its legs are going like clappers, but it looks really peaceful. It floats across the water. And that's kind of what you do in politics, because if you vote against your party, it makes your life so much more difficult for the things you do want to do. So you've got to, because, I want, for instance, we talked about hydrogen power earlier in Barrow. I want the Secretary of State for Business and Trade to sign off that project. Now, if I've just pissed my party off for the last 6 months by consistently voting against them, why are they going to favour me over someone who has been really compliant? So you have the battles, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's all about that balance. And sometimes I'll get it wrong, sometimes I'll get it right, but generally the things I've fought for and cared passionately about, you pick your battles, I've managed to get them.
That's great.
Conscious about time, but I think final question for you. What are your future aspirations within politics?
So, I'm not massively ambitious. If there's one job in politics I would really, really like to do, I'd love to be the security minister. I think it is a fascinating job. But you know what? This job eats your life and your time. It's absolutely amazing. The things you get involved with, the stuff you get to know, the people you get to meet, absolutely incredible. And I've got a piece of work to do, which is all about delivering the things we've talked about during this podcast. So we've got all this investment coming in. We've got AUKUS, we've got all that stuff. I want to see it bedded in and cemented, and that means not taking my eye off the ball and doing something else as well. So I think if I can walk away in a couple of years' time, if people have me again after the election, and say I've landed all that, I'll be very, very happy. But I think if anyone sees me in number 10, they need to be very, very worried. I'm not entirely sure I'm the person for that job.
So I actually just asked one final question because I was desperate to ask it.
One final
final. So I just wanted to put a point across for you that I think a lot of people my age, so 18 to maybe 35, or perhaps even wider than that, are turned off to politics, I'd say. They're sort of sick of one party saying black, the other party saying white. All seem disingenuous. You get promised something, don't get delivered. And like I say, you don't know who to trust and what to listen to. So you just get turned off from it. So what would your initial response to that be? How do you swing the tide, and how do you change politics so it's not just one says black, the other says white, and it just gets a bit boring? You don't believe anyone.
So my slightly flippant answer would be to burn down social media, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the reality of it is we've got to make things slower and more personal. So we live in a world of black and white because of 24-hour news, because of social media, because of weaponization of facts and false news and all that sort of stuff we hear about. But actually a conversation like this, hopefully, your listeners will say, there's nuance there, there's a person behind all that. It's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time going around and talking at schools and trying to get around as much of the community as possible, because it's so easy to think of politicians as these faceless machines who just hack away at each other, and it's such a horrible environment to work in if that's what it's actually like. So we need to make things matter to people again, and we need to be in a position where we're explaining why we're doing what we're doing and why this matters to you and your family, and how you can get involved to change things. And that's what I spend my days doing, and it's why I'm here right now. But we've all got to do a bit of that. And I don't know how you change the system we operate in, the social media environment and all that, which drives some of the bad behaviours. But we need to look at that too.
Is this something that we could help with personally through our podcast? Would you be open to maybe coming on every couple of months, discussing any particular topics that you would like to clear up across the area? Is that something that you would? I mean,
if you'll have me, your listening figures may plummet. But,
I think that's something we should do on both sides. So you've got more than one party in there, and it'd be good to get all the different views and different points on everything, I suppose.
We're genuinely passionate about the area we live in, so to keep in touch with you on the projects, and for everyone else listening to keep in touch. But I think I've learned a lot and understood a lot just from talking to you for an hour. So welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much for your
Yeah,
time.
thanks very much.
I've really enjoyed it, and I'd love to come back. So
Thanks very much.
and come and talk to me about your other projects.
Yeah, we've got a few to talk to you about actually. Another episode maybe.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant, that.